Hi there. Deciding today I'm going to talk about sort of about politics and the so-called left and the right as it's being defined in today's day and age. Although that's not really the political spectrum or how it works, but I guess they're being made to reference modern political theory or what some people are trying to refer to as modern politics. I think it's mostly being aimed at the United States because, of course, there's only two parties officially in the United States: the Democrats and the Republicans. If you're a Democrat, you're a left-wing liberal, and if you're a Republican, you're a right-wing conservative. And it's funny how those parties have changed over the years because a Democrat used to be a Southern segregationist party. I mean, literally, that's what it was. It was born out of the South. It was a farmers coalition party basically, and it wasn't. And the Republican Party in the old days wasn't actually considered a conservative party. It was actually considered a liberal, sort of a liberal party in favor of industrialism. But yeah, regardless, the left and the right, I find it a curious argument because, traditionally speaking, conservatism had nothing to do with freedom and liberty and gun rights. It had everything to do with divinity and monarchy. It's just a new term to describe an old system because before there was any political spectrum at all, there was just divinity and monarchy. Monarchies got born in the old days, and not clear how they got born, but they got born, and that's basically all these systems have been an attempt to escape in some way, shape, or form from them. Um, but yeah, the conservatives were all about tradition and hierarchy and maintaining your family name and the principles of legacy. Um, the United Kingdom in the 18th century was a conservative divine, still considered conservative divine monarchy. There was still a large proportion was still subordinate to the divinity of under the Christian God, which is why they have the Church of England. But the first movement against this was considered a left-wing movement. I guess it came out of the French Revolution because the rebellion ones were sitting on the left and the conservative ones are sitting on the right. Oh, that's a kind of a silly way of looking at it. But the liberals in the earliest days were actually the first movement against conservative uh, monarchies, and sort of how they got their name was from a French name for liberate and liberty. But yeah, liberals traditionally liberalism under the political spectrum was the first movement, and the first country to really adopt any of the concepts was the United States. It didn't have to be the United States, but it ended up being the United States. And the United States was the earliest incarnation of full democracy, full liberalism, and full constitutional republic with an actual checks and balances, three sections of government. And yeah, that was what the liberals had proposed. The United States was the first ones to really do that. Now, it was not perfect by any means. There was lots of things that needed improvement, and I think the founding fathers always had the idea that there should be improvement. They just wanted to get something written up and done and put out, and they said, okay, we're going to do this. We're not going to have a king anymore. We're going to have President of the United States, blah, 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 blah. We're going to do all this shit. The only reason why the gun rights is there is because in order to beat the British, to allow, you had to get a militia force created. That was the whole gun rights issue. That's how they got the Second Amendment, was because that's how we got the Second Amendment, was because we needed firearms. And back in those days, a musket was something that everybody had to own. The thing was, there was no such thing as special weapons for the military and other weapons for the civilian. There was only one type of weapon. The gun, the earliest incarnations of gun was just a musket. It was a musket. That was all there was. there was no special equipment for the military at that time. You owned a musket or you didn't. And so the right to bear arms is really just a reference to organizing a militia under the case of need of war. But whatever, I'm not going to talk today about the right to own firearms. That's just where that came from. The reason why the liberals also wanted to reduce the power of wanted to split the power of the church and the state. So they said separate them. Because under England, you'd had countless, under the old world of monarchy, you had countless civil wars over religion. In the United States, they kind of wanted to get rid of that problem because they already had like 20 different sects of Christianity that were running around the system. So they said, no, we're not going to have that. The founding fathers, almost all of them had different opinions. So they said immediately, no, we're not going to bother with a state religion, so we're going to separate the powers of church and state. And of course, they had to give them, in order to give themselves the access rights to property or owning somebody, they had to do that. They had to include slavery in their constitution because, of course, if they wanted to own slaves themselves, they had to let everybody else who wanted to own slaves. But they did put a provision in there for you having a free city or a free municipality. That did happen. They actually put that provision in there. You had the right to say no to slavery. It didn't happen very often. But there was a few free cities. Nonetheless, that's what they had to do. Was it perfect? No. It had to be changed over time. Whatever. That's not the argument here. So the United States was the first liberal democracy, the first liberal country. There was nothing supposed to be special about it. It was just they wanted to do it. They wanted to escape the evils of what they considered to be monarchies, conservative monarchies. Later on, people like somebody named Karl Marx came along and invented the concept of one world revolution and violent overthrow of established systems. And what they want to do is get rid of all the hierarchies. So like, there's not much to say about it. Communism was all about trying to stake out freedom under a different dialect of freedom. The concept was to remove all hierarchy. So the only way to be free is to remove hierarchy. The only way to be free is to eliminate all the people that are making you not free. They have a problem though. And later the socialists tried to rectify this. The socialism and communism are kind of in the same basket case, where the socialists sort of split off from the communists because they wanted a softer transfer of power. They wanted to switch over to a democracy, a parliament system, senate system in a softer way than the communists wanted a straight buckshot run into full equality and say the heck with all the old systems. Won't say how well they did. Actually, I can say they have done so well that that most countries have kind of tossed them aside. There's only a few communist countries left, most of which I would say have been operative failures. I guess North Korea could be called a success if you can call the Nutcracker Assembly to be a success story. And socialism, well, most countries that have tried it have done exceedingly well at tanking their economies, so I guess it works fine. It must work fine. Venezuela is doing so well right now that oil production is dropping like a rock now, and food production is dropping, and it's doing quite well, yes. Meanwhile, the other political thing is what they call fascism, and there's a huge argument online about fascism and communism and authoritarianism. A bad argument because conservative monarchies are authoritarian, the communist dictatorships end up turning authoritarian, and the fascists end up adopting dictatorship and turning authoritarian. Fascists are a peculiar political group. They're hard to define because they kind of look like conservatives too. They want authoritarian structures, and they have all the same systems. The only real difference between fascism and conservatism is that one is chaotic and the other one wants some principles of legacy. So, and the thing is, the countries that adopted fascism over the years, from the first two, Argentina and Italy were the first two, slowly followed by Japan, Germany, Spain. They couldn't. I always called them the angry people. They're angry about something. They don't know what they're angry about, but they're angry about something. They're going to adopt a new system. They have to support the workers' movements in some way because that's the largest group. So they adopt that. And it's just a big mess because what they ended up being was just these places that just did not know when to stop with everything they were doing. They adopted the mentality of ethnic purity and ethnic superiority because they wanted a workers' revolution, but not for everybody, just for them, just for their ethnic group. Um, I don't know. The fascists are a peculiar group of people because they just created this concept that they were going to try and make the system work better. They wanted tradition. They all wanted tradition. They all wanted a past. They all wanted an agrarian past, predating the industrialists. Because in some ways they hated the industrialists because the industrialists represented the new liberal movements and the new concepts of capitalism. They didn't really like capitalism because they viewed capitalism as being like sort of the antithesis of tradition. That's nothing new though. Conservatives, divine monarchies, largely didn't like capitalism either. It's just that in the old days, capitalism didn't exist. There was something called mercantilism, but I can't really get into that. The fascists are kind of a peculiar bunch. They came and they went. There's no fascist countries left, ironically. There's communist countries, but there's no fascist countries. The fascist countries kind of vanished. They had to be removed. But yeah, there's my take on the political spectrum and how it should work, how it is sort of working, I guess. It's there.